My name is Ryan Chambers, and I am presenting the Treaty of Greenville Peace Medal from 1795. When I was looking for an artifact to research, I was at first a bit lost. My first stop was a meeting with Dr. Kostrun to discuss my options, and per her advice, I narrowed my search to the late 18th century, early 19th century, as I am very curious about that era. After visiting the professor, I had to narrow down my search, and on a limited time schedule, it made things difficult. My first stop was a children's museum. While they had plenty of interesting and some historic exhibits, much of what I found there was simply too new. Next, I went to the Indiana Historical Society, and while I found some things that were interesting, they were all centered around Indiana, and I wanted an artifact that affected the entire nation rather than a portion of it. This brought me to the Indiana State Museum. I was thinking if I found mostly Indiana-related things at the Historical Society, the chances were the State Museum would be similar. I wandered through the museum for nearly an hour before I hit the jackpot, so to speak. An immersive exhibit that talked about the Treaty of Greenville from the Native American side of things. This struck me instantly because I had taken an American Studies course the previous semester at the Eiteljorg Museum and remembered a similar exhibit house there. Being next door to one another made things simple enough, and I was able to find the exhibit with no problems, which is where these pictures come from. The first image is an artist's rendering of the Treaty of Greenville Peace Medal, as it would have appeared when first issued. Next, we have the medal itself and the surrounding display. I made several attempts to photograph the back of the medal, but the angle of the display and the no-touching exhibits rule made it an impossible goal. Security was also on standby to ensure that the displays were not disturbed. I was able to hold my hand up beside the image to show a size comparison, however the image is a bit blurry. My initial observation was how large it was. When I held up my hand for comparison, and the medal is nearly as large as my hand, I had seen several pictures of these medals before and was surprised at the size of this one. The first feature I noticed was the stylized version of the Great Seal of the United States of America. The rays that stretch out behind the eagle and the ribbon clutched in its beak. I at first missed the words at the bottom, which read the Treaty of Greenville, August 3rd, 1795. The medal was also incredibly flat. After examining it further, I was able to add more detail to the medal to include the portion at the bottom of the medal. Emotionally, I was drawn to the story, more so than the medal itself, but without the medal there would be no reason to have such a story, so the two are one and the same. Chief Little Turtle in his speech said, "Do not deceive us in the manner the French, the British, and the Spaniards have heretofore done." The speech is an inspirational one in which he pleads on behalf of all the tribes gathered at the treaty. My research question has evolved several times, but in its purest form it is simply why. Why are there no names? Why is there only a depiction of the Great Seal of the United States of America and no representation of any of the native tribes? The gorgets created around the same time do depict a native and American theme mixed together, so why is the peace medal different? My secondary source turned out to be the primary source. I found the original Treaty of Greenville, and through reading it I was able to gather a lot of the feeling for those involved in the treaty. The information from our library presentation was useful because it helped me narrow down my options to sources that were relevant to my artifact rather than the treaty, tribes, or land in general. I was able to discern why only the American seal appeared on the medal. It was a treaty between the Western Confederacy and the American government. The leader of said government was the President of the United States, George Washington. It would make sense then for the peace medal to bear what in effect is the President's mark. Further research is needed, and I enjoy looking at the Native American side of things, in particular Chief Little Turtle of the Miami tribe. I would also like to know more about the other tribes and leaders in attendance and their thoughts on the treaty. The biggest question I have is how many of these medals were made. I have found antique dealers selling these medals, and they look identical to the one on display at the Eiteljorg. Are these real? Forgeries? Collectibles? These questions need answers. For those curious enough to pursue this line of inquiry, I recommend the exhibit at the Eiteljorg Museum and the Indiana State Museum. The State Museum has a mock-up of the village and Chief Little Turtle's speech, while the Eiteljorg has the actual peace medal and several tidbits of information surrounding it.